Brandy's Corner. Brandy was healing from her big operation, so we decided to spend a week with Mom and Dad at the Stark house. It was midwinter and we turned off the highway just as the day was breaking. The snow was blowing like crazy, visibility was limited, but the county road to the house seemed to be fairly clear. I rounded the final uphill curve, about a mile from the house, and the Suburban came to a sudden stop. The snow had blown over the road and I had suddenly sunk over the axles with the wheels off the frozen ground. No forward, no backward, no go. The four-wheel drive was useless, so we sat there for a while contemplating what was next. From our high point we could see a snowplow working the highway and other roads, but after an hour he never came up our road. While we waited, the wind was forming a dune around the car. It was growing so fast we had to open the doors and push the snow back every few minutes. Remember, this was before cell phone service. I made the decision to walk to the house and call for help. As I started out, the snow was so deep that I only had the top of the fence posts to guide me up the road. It was the longest mile because of the thigh-deep snow. I arrived at the house totally exhausted and the phone rang. It was Kristen checking on our arrival, wondering why we were so late. She said she would call for help, so I started up the snowmobile to return to the car. The drifts were so deep on the road that I had to dig the snowmobile out several times, and finally could only get to within a quarter mile or so of the car. Slogging again through the drifts, I arrived at the car so exhausted I could barely talk. That was when I was told, "Your dad decided to hike to the highway for help." I knew it was impossible for him to slog the 2 miles to the highway, and the visions of heart attack or freezing rushed through my head. I was so exhausted from my hike, I knew pursuing him was impossible. As we sat there not knowing what to do, the car door opened, and he slumped into the seat. He had quickly realized that hiking for him was not going to happen. We sat there, waiting, stepping outside to use the potty, conserving fuel by only running the heater for a few minutes at a time as the morning passed. Finally, in the distance we could see the snowplow working its way up our road. After spending most of the day in anxiety, worried about Brandy and our situation, the plow arrived, pulled us back and plowed the road up to our cattle guard. The drifts on each side of the road were head-high. I still had to dig the snowmobile out as the snowplow pushed it aside and turned it over as he cleared the drift where it was buried. Finally, a fire, a warm house, a bathroom, and a story to relate for years to come. Our unofficial name for that infamous uphill piece of county road, Brandy's Corner. Rough times at Bitter Creek. I know this won't be fun to write about nor entertaining to read, but one of the precepts of this book is that it is about my life, feelings, and thoughts. Certainly, the recently passed episode between Merlene and me qualifies on all 3 counts. Nothing before, not even Brandy's problems, has so affected my life. Like many couples our age, we had grown apart. Our attitudes, expectations, and understanding for each other were all wrong. Yet we both perceived all this as another thing. Like many other men, I thought I was unappreciated, unrespected, and unloved by both my wife and family. My rock-solid dependability had become expected and not appreciated. I had worked myself into an enslavement of expectations with no rewards for good behavior. I really can't speak for Merlene, but every snide comment and negative action that I had made during our married years had been stored, not forgotten, and her resentment of me had grown and multiplied through the years. Because of work pressure and these personal frustrations, I came very near to a nervous breakdown. I blew my lid, I stormed, and I said things. I regained enough control, however, that I knew I must get away from the business and home for a few days to get a handle on things. Merlene did not understand that mentally I was on the edge. She took my irrational behavior as a personal threat to her and her financial security. I was screaming for love and understanding, and she and the kids were worried about themselves. At that time, I could not understand this, and their reaction just further verified my reasoning that my only importance to them was to provide the way of life to which they were accustomed. I went to New Mexico and spent more than a week by myself at the house. I walked, worked on the computer, and played golf. It was the longest week in my memory. The possible scenarios of my future and my dark thoughts were my only companions. I called home a couple of times, but what little conversation I could draw from Merlene showed no regret or sympathy for the pain I felt. I was feeling very sorry for myself. Upon returning home, I felt that I had managed to fight back the dark and negative thoughts, and could make up for the bad things I had said to her. It was the biggest shock of my life to find out from a friend that she had filed for divorce while I was in New Mexico. Shock is not really a good word for the feeling. You hear the words, but it really takes a couple of hours for all the emotions to burst forth. Many years ago, I answered the phone after returning from the hospital and the birth of my third girl child. The man on the other end of the line said, "Mr. Stark, this is Dr. Sebastian, and I have just finished an examination of your child. I have some bad news. She is retarded, a mongoloid idiot. Do you understand?" The feeling was the same. I said yes, and that I appreciated his calling so promptly. I asked if Merlene knew yet, and he said that he thought it best for us not to tell her at this time. It took at least a couple of hours sitting there on the edge of the bed by the phone, getting cleaned up and shaving, all the time the emotions and thoughts building up and growing. As I said before, as shocking as the news of Brandy's condition was at that time, it was small beside the words that Merlene wanted to divorce me. In the following days my emotions ran alternately through anger, fright, despair, but I began to realize one thing. That was how very much I valued our marriage and relationship. I did not want a divorce. I did not understand why we were in this position, but I began to fight to stop the divorce proceedings. We began to see 2 different marriage counselors, and the doors started opening for me. I began to see how the same incidents and actions could be viewed in totally different ways. I began to understand how Merlene could come to the point of filing for divorce. In short, I began to see and understand. I learned many things, but it is still hard to live these principles. The 2 most important things I learned though are, I truly love my wife and treasure her, and my love must be Christ-like. You must love with no demands or expectations. You must feel joy in the giving, not the receiving. You must respect and value your loved one above all people and things. The experience was a humbling one for me. As our marriage has returned to a stable institution, it would be easy to slip back into the old ways. I keep catching myself thinking the way I used to. A quick thought about those 2 months of turmoil quickly gives me an attitude correction, and I strive again to be my best. I wouldn't prescribe the treatment, but for myself, I think I am a better person now. I know that my value of human relationships has increased. A day at church with my family, a quiet talk with a friend, extending some small help to an employee, or a smile from my wife, these are some of the things that really count. Tiffany and statistics. Tiff is a junior now at TCU and has finally gotten into the swing of college academics. She was never a top-flight student, just a top-flight person. This year, however, she learned how good it felt to make good grades and the satisfaction of achieving. That's part of the reason I got so mad when a couple of DIP teachers threw cold water on her enthusiasm. This female statistics teacher had been giving the class a hard time all year because of her resentments about being part-time and underpaid. Finally, because of her refusal to provide any help after class and her unfairness in testing, Tiffany decided to take her frustrations and complaints to a higher authority. This is where the cold water came in. The apparent nerd, mathematics chairman, treated her like a cry-baby child. He was late for their appointment. He made her stand up for the half-hour meeting. He left the office door open with the offending teacher in the outer office, and a whole list of other stuff. What really got my goat was his last comment. "I can't do anything about it because she is only part-time, and besides you should be happy that you have anyone to teach you." Tiffany related this story to me over Mexican food at the Monterey house that night. I was so very proud of her, for mustering the courage to stand up for her rights. And I was so pissed about the treatment she received that I had the shakes all during the meal that night. Well, I wrote a letter of complaint to the Chancellor of TCU and to the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I told them that I expected to be able to tell my daughter that her thoughts and rights were respected by the administration of that school. That very next Saturday afternoon a call came to the house from the Chancellor. I was gone, and he spoke to Tiffany, confirming that he had read the letter and would look into the problems. I was really proud of Tiffany, and I think she was proud that I stood up for her. Ain't it sweet when things come together? Pig in a Cadillac. A farm store story. Man pulls up in a new Cadillac, comes into the store and asks what kind of pig feed he needs for his pig. I ask how old the pig is. He says he doesn't know, he just picked him up in the country, but could I tell by looking? We walk outside. He opens the back door to the new Cadillac. He had removed the back seat and in its place is a 50-pound pig, and 25 pounds of pig crap. I asked him why he used the new Cadillac to haul the pig. He said it was the only car he had. I sold him a 50-pound bag of pig maker pellets. Trip to Marco Island. Each year that we continue to survive as an IAMS and/or a science diet distributor brings on the annual trips to distributor meetings. Hills has been hung up on Scottsdale, Arizona. Merlene doesn't enjoy just sitting beside the pool, and since that's about all there is to do, she has about given up on this pilgrimage. She did attend the IAMS meeting in Marco Island this year. I have been on the IAMS National Advisory Council and have been assigned the task of making recommendations for the format of the meeting. I recommended a mix of recognition, recreation, along with a presentation that was professional and focused on the things that most interested the distributor. To my delight, the company actually listened and put together an excellent meeting. Merlene enjoyed the trip and it was good business as well as good fun. We played golf one afternoon, a tournament with 4-man team scrambles. On one of the first holes, I needed to mark my ball on the green and found that I had no marker in my pocket. The fellow from Toronto pitched me a quarter and I marked my ball. After waiting my turn, I replaced the ball on the green, picked up the quarter, and putted. As we were walking off the green, the Toronto guy in a loud voice said, "That's okay, Les, just keep the quarter." I had stuck it in my pocket out of habit. It was embarrassing and disquieting as I walking over and returned the quarter. After all, it was just a quarter. Would you believe it, on the next hole, intent on the scoring and birdie opportunities, I lost consciousness and asked for a marker again. You guessed it, I forgot and put it in my pocket. This time as I walked from the green, he roared to the other players. "This guy is a real businessman. He can lose every hole and still end the day $6.50 ahead." From then on, the whole crew found some cute thing to say after every putting green. "Les, can I use dimes instead of quarters? Les, can I negotiate a better rate?" etc. etc. That night at the awards banquet, the recognition for the longest drive, the best putt, etc., Rob Easterling said he had a special award to give for the most imaginative entrepreneur on the golf course, Les Stark. I had to walk up and receive an Olympic-style medallion in front of 300 of my distributor peers. Everyone, including Clay Mathel, the company owner, enjoyed the story and it was a subject of discussion from then on. These business meetings are enjoyable but are far from a purely recreational outing. Politics is hot and heavy. Meeting the right people, making a good impression on that person that will construct judgments about you as a distributor, cultivating that personal friendship with the right people in the company. These are essential to our financial future. For many years I thought of myself as an independent, a loner, who did not have to answer to anyone but myself. I realized that the reality is much different. We must be political, we must play the game, and it is an important part of communication for all parties concerned to learn the intentions of the other. At the final banquet, Merlene and I found ourselves sitting with the young man who had been jointly responsible for putting together the meeting. His name is Don Layden. We made some small talk, but he was 2 chairs over and communication is difficult over an orchestra and clanking of waiters. After a few minutes, as I was talking with Mike Altschuld, who was also seated at the table beside me, I learned that Don Layden was the young plant worker that had wooed Clay's daughter and talked her into marriage. Clay is the owner of the IAMS company, a high-rolling multimillionaire, and did not take well to his daughter marrying an uneducated working stiff. The story goes that he told Don if he wanted his daughter, he would have to promise to attend and graduate from college. He is, and they are. Well, to continue my story, much as I was aware of what I was doing, I suddenly found my interest in conversation with Don had increased. He really is a nice kid, and he really did a great job of putting together the meeting. As I was reassuring him of the fine job, I kept thinking about my motives. I guess there isn't much doubt about my motives. I would like to maintain or increase the level of income that my family and I receive from sales of the IAMS product. If telling the son-in-law what a great job he did helps, and if it was the truth, what harm does it do? We are on the Delta Airlines flight back to DFW at the time of this writing. I have a new compact LTE computer that is no bigger than a notebook and weighs about 6 pounds. So, I sit here, with it on the tray in front of me clicking away. Rod and Danita are a couple of rows back, but the plane noise pretty much isolates you. We have a whole high school band on board and they are giving the hostesses a hard time. Every time the hostess comes down the aisle, she has to work her way through about 20 or so visiting and giggling in the aisles. We are coming from Orlando. They must have been on a special trip to Disney World. Tiffany and Lemur are supposed to pick us up at the airport. Lemur Dunn is her true love, and she talks to us and with him about marriage. I guess this will be one of those fun things to look back on later when this is read, for who knows what the future holds.